Every person, superhuman vision, superhuman hearing, superhuman memory, superhuman cognition. That's what I'm talking about. A tremendously equalizing technology. That is the vision that we have for these wearables.
Boz, it's great to see you. I've been looking forward to this recording for a long time. I'm even, kind of zooming in or riversiding in from a hotel room for this. So let's just kind of get into it. And many people might already know this, but I doubt it. But you were part of the California program where you raised livestock and essentially grew up on a farm, which, by the way, I went to a high school on a farm, so I'm very sympathetic. I'm curious, how did that experience influence the person you are today?
Yeah, people are often surprised by the fact that I grew up on a farm, and my family's farming from way back and still is farming to this day. But actually, really, if you know about farmers, three things that are important to know about farmers. Number one is they're governed by time, daylight, and seasons. They have X number of daylight hours to which they get their work done, and they got to get it done because the seasons are moving forward. And that forces two other things. The first one is every one of them is an engineer. You got to fix that tractor now because you got to get that crop done. You got to mend that fence today. You don't have time to be dealing with getting this livestock back in the pen. So they're all engineers, not scientists. I mean, real, like get it done with what you have on hand kind of engineers. And the second one is they're entrepreneurs. My family runs a horse ranch. Well, a horse ranch means you got a lot of manure. Well, you got two ways to handle that. The one is you can pay someone to pick that manure up and haul it off, and that's going to cost you money. The second one is you can market that manure as fertilizer, and you can make a little money. And that's a 2-for-1 swing. And so my cousins who are still farming and my uncles who are still farming, it's either a cost or an opportunity. And the more you can turn things into opportunities, and the margins are slim, so you got to make those opportunities work. So in my experience, at least, it's not as big a stretch as people thought. But I do want to shout out, the 4-H, National 4-H organization and California State 4-H. I learned how to program in 4-H. It's not just cows and cooking, as we like to say. The first person who taught me to program was a fellow 4-H'er and got me into computers that way. So it's a great program, and I still am involved with it to some degree at the national level. My cousins, my nephews, they're all still in 4-H. So it was a great program for me, not just from a entrepreneurial and engineering standpoint, but also directly programming computers.
Was there anything in addition for the farming and the 4-H experience, like obviously getting you exposure to, kind of programming in the digital world? Was there anything else in the kind of farming that also shaped how you think about the interface between the digital and physical worlds?
Well, it's interesting. I think the point that humans are busy. They got a lot of things on their plate, and the tool either has to work for them or it's just not worth it. I really think that when we think about how we build these tools, a lot of times we're beset by the tremendous value that we see, especially in our industry. We see how great it could be. And this isn't new. This goes back Douglas Engelbart, right, who invented the mouse. To some degree, his vision at SRI failed because he had such a complex idea. He wanted humans to do a ton of work to get skilled enough to unlock the full power of the machine. And my understanding is even in his retirement in his late in the 90s, he lamented the fact that we took the easy exit. We took the computer mouse and we ran with it and just did this point and click stuff, whereas he wanted to replace the keyboard with the chord set. Like, he had all these ideas. And I think that's a lesson we keep relearning, which is like, it has to be so easy. Like, the big pot of value at the end is great, but it still has to be so easy to get at it that you can lead people down that path. Because if they have to take a course to learn how to do it, they're not going to do it. It doesn't matter how valuable it is. And I think that's true that's nothing to do with anything but just how humans are. But that's true in a wood shop. That's true in an auto shop. The tool that you can pick it up and you're like, yep, I see it, I get it, I use it, it works. That's the tool people reach for time and time again, not the super elaborate, complex one. So I think about that all the time, because that was the truth growing up on a farm. Is you had to get it done. You didn't have time to be trying to learn a new thing. You had to get it done.
So I love that way to start, because when people think about technology, at least lately, they think so much about the digital world, and it feels like there's nothing more real world than like working on a farm and using tools to fix your equipment and making sure the cows get milked and sort of all that stuff that's in the real world. But we're in this new era, this new ecosystem of device wearables and smartphones and, of course, glasses. And so, how do you think about sort of this new world where we're actually going to navigate and engage with the physical world with technology, through digital in a way that we used to interact with digital spaces?
Yeah, this is the construct of the metaverse, which I think has been pretty broadly misunderstood, or at least is understood differently by different people, is this idea of a blending of the digital and the physical together.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, let's keep with the farming theme because it's great. Farmers are on the pioneering some amazing work. Autonomous driving is not as far along as autonomous farming is. The tractors that are able to plow the fields automatically, drones that are out there doing a reconnaissance on what fields need what kind of treatment. That is actually pretty advanced technology. And it really is very much about blending the physical and the digital capabilities together. And so we had this amazing explosion with the internet and software. And I think we took software as far as it could go within the construct of a phone, a laptop. Like it's like we just took it to the absolute limit. And what's exciting me now is these really physical manifestations where through advanced sensors, whether it be video, audio, mechatronics, whether it be drones or robotics, automation, and then ultimately I think through wearable devices, we're getting to a new plateau of hardware that can further allow software to breathe and expand. AI is such a fun example because it's so vogue right now. And if people have had a chance to ignore all the hype and really try to use these tools in their daily lives, there are some areas where it's mind-blowingly useful. I'm doing a little home automation project and I'm debugging, and there's these obscure, Internet of Things devices that have unlisted APIs. And it would take me a long time to build a fuzzer to discover those. Man, you can do it in minutes with these tremendously useful AIs. Of course, there's a ton of things that they're not good at, but I still find the interface to them very awkward, where I'm going to my phone or I'm going, whether it's voice or text, it's this very transactional thing. And what's so funny, I find myself, I'm like the cut and paste machine suddenly. Like I'm doing a coding project here, and I'm like, okay, I got to cut this result, the debugger output into here, and then it gives me the answer, and I'm cutting and pasting back into the thing. And I'm like, why am I? What system of events happened where I'm now the cut and paste machine? This should all be integrated. And we have demos internally in our wearables, and with the Ray-Ban Metas that are in market today through our early access program, you can use this tool called Live AI. 30-minute session until the battery runs out because it was kind of bolted on after the fact. But for 30 minutes, it can see what you're seeing, it hears what you're hearing. And the difference in how useful it is to me as I go about my day in the world. I was doing a film development project, and film developing is a real fussy business with what kind of chemical, at what temperature, for how long. And so usually I'm doing it with like a laptop next to me, and I'm trying to type into the laptop, okay, what's the thing? Doing it with the Live AI session was incredible. It just sees what you're doing. It's like, okay, you got 20 more minutes of doing that, and then you're going to do this other thing, and why don't you go ahead and prepare this now? It's stunning. So for me, it is about blending the physical and digital together in both directions. You have to give the AI access to the physical context in which you operate, and the digital context in which you operate on your desktop or on your phone. And conversely, you want to be able to bring those digital constructs into reality through robotics, through automation. So I see really a very, very exciting kind of decade ahead of us in that synthesis.
I love it.
So let's broaden out to kind of AI generally. I mean, like I'm enough of a geek and kind of the interface with kind of the digital and the physical world and how that transforms what it is to be human and Homo techne. I could spend the entire discussion on this, which will be amazing. But there's also kind of AI, kind of more broadly. So what's kind of the meta view of kind of AI and in, use in the products, use in the world, kind of what is the kind of the AI philosophy for design for people and kind of what's coming? And, one of the things I'm reminding, I need to get you a signed copy of my new book, Super Agency, because I'm quite certain in discussing this with you, we'd have a great conversation and we're actually seeing the world in very similar ways.
So there's three layers to this in my mind. The first one is, we're building these very exciting models, And I have a profound belief. I find myself actually sometimes at war with both sides of the AI discussion. I have a profound belief that these are hugely important, meaningful things that will meaningfully advance human capability. I kind of liken it to a word calculator, right? In the year 1960, a calculator was a person. In the year 1970, it was not a person anymore. It was a different thing. And I think all of us, and at first they like ban them from school and get rid of them. And I grew up in you won't have a calculator with you at all times. I have 3 calculators with me at all times. My high school teachers were wrong about that. I think of the AIs that we are building as word calculators. I really mean that word image, like visual, like they're really complex calculators that have moved beyond the simple symbolic space of mathematics into this higher order space. I also don't think it is even the kind of thing that is human intelligence as we understand intelligence and agency and consciousness and thought. And so I find myself, I have to fight both sides. Like AI is both a huge deal and also not that kind of a huge deal. So that's like my first kind of belief about it, which gives me tremendous, confidence in how I use the tool. The second one is we're running into the information theoretic limits of it, and we've talked about throwing compute at it and scaling laws. But if you go all the way back to like Norbert Wiener and his cybernetics of the first, constructs of information theory, this idea of how many bits can we pull out of something that are generalizable, that are sufficiently generalizable bits. And we're finding out that for all the corpus of human media ever produced, it's not enough. It's not enough. We're finding that in robotics. Robotics is an effort that we've kicked off recently inside of Meta in partnership kind of as kind of an adjunct to our Llama program. And when no matter how many videos you have of somebody grabbing a coffee cup, you're actually not getting the data you need because you don't know the proprioception of how much force was applied and how we detected that, okay, this is a plastic cup. It's going to deflect to a certain point. There's condensation on it. So I need to apply a little bit more force to counter the loss of friction that I'm experiencing. We do that autonomically. We don't even, there's not a single conscious thought in our head when we're doing those things. Aria, when you're taking your phone into your pocket, you don't know what the angle of your second digit is or how much force you're applying with your thumb to avoid getting the keys. To some degree, the things that we think of as intelligence, we're talking about, the higher order functions of the human brain. That's arguably the less impressive part of intelligence. The deep brain, the mammalian, the amygdala, that lizard brain intelligence, that is wildly hard for us to capture in the modern era. So as much as I'm excited about the word calculator, I really do believe in Jan LeCun's vision that you have to do this pioneering work to break through to a world model that has common sense, that understands causality in a more substantial way, not in a statistical kind of soup way, but in a model-based way. He always uses this example. It's true, man. My 4-year-old daughter, she's now 7, when she was 4, could drive a golf cart. And if there was like a turkey in the road, which would happen in Carmel sometimes, she could drive around it. Whereas Waymo would just stop. It's like, I don't know. I don't have a turkey filter. I don't have the data on the turkey. I got to stop. I give up. And then my third layer of this stuff is I want it to be embodied. I really think it is not, I think it almost goes back to like J.C.R. Licklider, who's one of the first computer scientists, to sit down at a terminal and do a live programming. And he believed in that vision. And he really was the one who then funded what would become SRI, found Doug Engelbart, funded a bunch of DARPA. It was at the ITO at DARPA. Like, I feel like we're in that era. We're in the terminal era of AI. And it doesn't want to be like that. It wants to be everywhere. It wants to be ubiquitous. It wants to be in full context of what your life is and with history of who you are and what your life is. I think about Douglas Hofstadter's book, I Am a Strange Loop, and how we all have little mini versions of each other's consciousness, simulations of each other's consciousness running in our brains that allow us to collaborate effectively. And my AI obviously doesn't have that. It has no idea what I want, what I'm about. It can't infer anything from context. So for me, like, I love where we are. I'm a huge believer in it. I also want us to invest in these world models, and I want to free it from the terminal.
And is the world models and the free from the terminal, are those fundamentally new, different technologies from the kind of scale transformer? Is it kind of a mixed, combination? Like what's the kind of looking through a glass darkly, thinking about how this would be done?
Yeah, I think I really think that the world model is a new, different thing. And as a consequence, I think it's an unknowable timeline. I'm reminded a little bit when I think about the world model of where we are with machine learning. When I was an undergraduate, and I graduated Harvard in 2004, and I taught a class, Introduction to Artificial Intelligence. It's actually where I met Mark. He was a student of mine in that class. We taught, as a matter of fact, that neural networks were a once promising, now known to be dead technology. Mm-hmm. And everyone had to build a handwriting recognition neural network, and it worked. And they're like, yep, that's all you can use it for. That's it. Congratulations, here's your degree. Okay. And now neural networks run the world. And Jan LeCun was right, and Jeffrey Hinton and Bengio, like they were right. And they all won the Turing Award, God bless them. And it took a series of other unlocks, GPUs in particular, to get to the point where that technology could flourish. So I wouldn't bet against Jan LeCun over a long enough timeline, but I don't know what the unlock is yet on that piece. I think the embodied part can do both. The embodied part will benefit a lot and maybe help a lot with world modeling. Once you have these sensors out there and you have better, richer data, when you have robotics data, which will give you proprioception, which will give you friction, like I think that is going to be a big unlock. So I think the embodied one is actually, maybe I sequenced it wrong. The embodied one is probably the in-between. It benefits the current models a huge amount to get that data and to be in that context. And also, it probably is some of the data that you need to start to understand what it takes to build a world model, which we appear to be born with.
And one of the Wearables project, I think you call it the Orion Project.
That's right.
I actually don't know why you named it Orion. I'm not saying that skeptically. I just don't know. And yes, exactly, very cool.
I brought them with me.
Yes, exactly. I had the pleasure and honor of coming by, Meta HQ and playing with it and getting some of the detailed exposure. So tell me about the Orion Project. Tell me about kind of what you see as the significant use cases and kind of where the metaverse is moving towards with Orion.
Yeah, this is so we've got the Orion glasses are on right now. I've also got this wristband, this neural interface wristband that is actually, I'll see if maybe I can show the camera a little bit. It's got these little kind of metal bumps on the back of it, all down the band, and those are measuring. They're EMG sensors, electromyography. They're measuring electrical impulses going down my hand, and what I'm able to do, and you won't be able to see anything, hopefully, if I'm doing this right. If you're looking straight at me, I've got a screen in front of me, and I have an internal prototype, so I can do my email. I can do Instagram. I'm not doing that right now, I promise. We have little games that you can play. I have been caught playing the games in meetings before. They weren't my meetings, to be fair. I was just listening in, but I have been caught. And I can do it. I could use my hands. It's got cameras, so I can use my hands forward facing. That's a little awkward. So I can do it with my wrist at rest by using a small number of gestures. This is the home gesture. Oh, I brought myself home. And this is the select gesture. And I'm using eye tracking to try to direct things. And so what we have to is we have to do a lot of tough problem solving on photonics and optics. Some of the stuff we understand. We understand how to build apps. We understand how to do these things. And there's some novel interaction design here with the wristband and eye tracking. But I think we've made that pretty straightforward. Doing the neural interfaces was super hard. You're building an AI model of what the hand is doing based on these electrical impulses that you're able to observe from the surface. And so you just need a lot of people to build a generalized model that works so that anybody can put this on. And I think we had success with you, Reid. I think we're well into the 95th percentile, I think, of people who put this on and can right away, we know what shape the hand is in. And that allows us to do these gesture-based controls, even with your hands in your pocket, behind your back, very subtle. That's right, the swipe gesture, yep. Swiping up and down, left and right. Tapping is this. This works. You can do a double tap to get your AIs. And so that was a lot of work. The hardest one was the optics and photonics. And so inside of this, there's a tiny projector. And if I hold this any closer to the camera, it'll be out of focus. You'll forgive me for my absurdly elaborate VC setup. But the inside his is a tiny projector, and it's using micro LEDs. We build these micro LEDs ourselves. We manufacture them ourselves. They 3 of them would fit inside of a red blood cell, and they're individually brighter than the sun. And they have to be incredibly efficient because you do not have a lot of battery on the headset. And actually, worse than battery, you don't have a lot of thermal space. You just can't drain a lot of heat because we can't burn your face. Burning faces is terribly bad, I'm told. I'm told it's not recommended for consumer electronics. So we have a tight thermal window. It has to be super, super efficient in how they generate things. Some of these things are really hard. Red wavelengths are really hard. Red is a really long wavelength of light. It's hard to generate it in a very, very small space. You have to use a lot of kind of mirrors and reflections and complex geometry. You're making these, absolutely tiny scale consumer electronics. So you're generating these photons. Then you have to bend the photons into the light. We use a thing called a waveguide. And waveguides use the construct of total internal reflection of light, the same way fiber optics work, to try to bend light in a certain pace. But of course, there's a couple other problems when you have glasses that aren't fiber optics, which are encased in a cover, which is that other photons enter from the world and get caught in those same light pipes. And that can create rainbows and haze and these kind of artifacts that are distracting to you. And then also some of those photons escape. So people outside can sometimes see them. In this case, we have a kind of an exit grating. So if I put my face at just the right angle, you can see a little bit there. Oh, that's just a reflection. Yep. If I put my face at just the right angle, you can see a little blue light escaping from the gratings. So you want to minimize the artifacts, because these need to be regular glasses first and foremost. When they're powered off, I have to be able to just see your eyes, to see my eyes. And like that has to be that human connection that we have is important. Otherwise, I wouldn't use the glasses. You have to do all of this in a comfortable all-day wearable form factor. There's a lot of challenges. This was, I thought, this was 10 years in the making. And we thought when we started this program that we had less than 10% chance of being able to build it. So the fact that it exists is a true testament, I think, to a vision that Mark Zuckerberg had, that the research team, Michael Abrash, our chief scientist, and his team had for a long, long period of time. We're doing everything from material sciences, developing new chemicals, new forms of glass. The photonics work was cutting edge, and it was super hard. Now, we always thought, to your point about the metaverse, that the first thing that would happen would be these holograms in the world. And at first there'd be just referenced to you, so it's just your personal interface. And then over time, they would be attached in the world. And then eventually you would have an AI that was doing it. What's been surprising to us is the AI came first. Like the AI moved up in we always had this vision. It was a vision that we've had from Mark and I had from day one. It was AI and AR were the things. Which is why we had this big investment in Facebook AI, fundamental AI research and FAIR, and this big investment in Reality Labs. We got the sequencing wrong. The AI showed up earlier than expected.
Yep.
So what's been so exciting is, just like I mentioned earlier, on the Ray-Ban Metas have live AI sessions, there's a lot of products now that are totally valid products that are easy to use between full AR glasses, which are spectacular, but will be expensive, and the Ray-Ban Metas, which are super affordable, but like on a little bit more limited in their functionality. That entire spectrum is now open to us, and it's really, really exciting.
Okay, I have a selfish question, which maybe we'll cut, and then a real question. So I am someone who sees 90% of my vision out of one eye. Mm-hmm. Will I be able to use these?
Yes. So these are binocular. So obviously you'll experience the same limits to depth perception that you would experience normally. Yeah. That's right. Although, of course, depth perception isn't primarily based on binocularity. It turns out it's based on movement of things through space and size. But anyways, I think so you'll still be able to use these.
Okay.
Over the future of time, I do expect one of the real option spaces here is, what if you go to monocular? What if you just had the display in one eye?
Yeah.
And there's some challenges there. It creates some binocular rivalry. So for people who have full vision in both eyes, they might struggle sometimes to know, hey, my eyes are seeing different things looking at the same space. Yeah. You would actually be better off in those displays. Can't
wait.
It would be a tremendous benefit.
I finally have a superpower.
You would have a little superpower. That's right. You'd have a little advantage. The monocular displays would probably be great for you, cheaper, lighter, and probably just as good. So I think you've got maybe a little inside opportunity on the rest of us.
I love it. Okay, so for some of the skeptics out there, I feel like this is especially a good question for you, because you were essentially the person who created the newsfeed. And for those of the youngs among us, they might not remember this, but the newsfeed came out and everyone was like, no, this is horrible. What are we doing? And now we're like, oh, a newsfeed. This makes so much sense. This is perfect. But they can't imagine a world without it.
Yeah.
And so some people might be saying the same thing. They might be saying, why are you creating these things that we don't need? Like, what would you say to the skeptics? And then also, as you see people using it, what do you think some of the mainstream adoptions are going to be?
Yeah. So there's two parts to this answer. The first one is with Newsfeed and products like Newsfeed, as much as people were kind of surprised by it and outraged by it, the usage was immediate.
Yeah.
It was immediate. People often ask us, like, how did you guys decide to stick with the news feed given the backlash? It wasn't actually hard, because internally we saw all of our users numbers doubled overnight, and they never went back down. And likewise, Newsfeed was a product built. There's kind of a famous idea in design, which is I'll use the example that is most often given is in a park. You look at a park, a natural place in a city, and people will tell you where the paths should be by cutting paths in the grass. So wherever you see the grass is trampled down, you put a path there. That was the kind of innovation that Newsfeed was. We watched the behavior of people on the site and just built a path that made what they were doing easier. Mm-hmm. Things like AI are different kinds of things. These are different types of innovations. These are truly new tools. This is a new space. This is a building, it's been constructed, and you can't just figure out where the paths should go later on. And so these are different types of innovations. They do come from the same place, which is at my alpha, my omega every day, and my team will tell you, the human says, what human on this earth is better off because they have this? And that involves thinking about, what are they doing instead of it? What is their current solution to the problem they have? What is the problem? Is it a big problem? By the way, there's two types of big problems. There's big problems, like rare but super big, and there's also super common but small. Those are both collectively big problems that we can go solve. But I'm find me the human whose life is just oh my God, way better. AI has been uneven at this. The answer for AI so far has been homework. Kids doing homework and getting help with homework has been by far, I think, the number one use case for AI. Number two has been coders, who used to go to Stack Overflow. Those are pretty close, I would say, to the park path story, because these are people who were previously using Google or online resources and are now using a consolidated form of that. The smartphone was a kind of a disruptive thing, where it was hey, you have a phone and you have an iPod, and you have you like the web. We're going to put all those in one places, right? That was the pitch. This will be similar to that. This will be hey, look, you already have a phone that you like doing this. You already like Instagram. This is a better way of doing a thing that you already do. Mm-hmm. And then once you've established that beachhead through comfortable paths, then the huge opportunity presents itself. You talked, Aria, about having superpowers. That is the vision that we have for these wearables. Mm-hmm. Every person, superhuman vision, superhuman hearing, superhuman memory, superhuman cognition. That's what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. That's what I really believe is going to happen here. A tremendously equalizing technology. Today we talk often in our society today about the vagaries of, the birth lottery, and we're rightly doing so. We usually talk about the birth lottery in the context of whether it be race and gender or physical geography. And those are hugely important factors in how our lives play out. But we don't talk about the other parts of the birth lottery: who has incredible memory, incredible vision, incredible hearing. Some people are born that just have those talents, incredible ability to think creatively, to pattern match, and there's no reason we couldn't all be Gary Kasparov in chess if we have the wearables. You know what I'm saying? Now, it probably takes the fun out of chess, so I'm not recommending anti-competitive performance. But my point is, the vagaries of the bell curve and the ranges of human capabilities are beyond just the demographic ones. They exist in terms of fundamental capabilities. And how interesting will we be as a society if everyone has the full access to those facilities? That is the future I see. And I think that's a pretty compelling pitch to people, to get them to try a new thing. But it still has to do Instagram.
Exactly. And I'm going to take this moment to ask you a question that I hate getting, so it's kind of entertaining to be able to be the asker of it, which is, if you're predicting out, call it 3 years, and with wearables and AI and everything else, what kinds of things do you see in the future that will be the kind of thing that people will be doing? Is it kind of like a it's giving me a constant scan on my life. It's doing the proactive search of, you're looking at film developing, or you're looking at this thing. Oh, let me tell you some stuff about this. What is your future prediction that might kind of, call it semi or non-technologists to go, oh my God, that's coming in 3 years?
Yeah. I think what's interesting, the hard part of this question is the timeline of it. I think you and I probably would do better in 1 year and 10 years.
Yes.
3 years is the most awkward time because, you can kind of, I know 1 year, I have a good sense of 10 years, 3 years is tough. I don't think we'll be at the proactive place in 3 years quite yet. I think we'll have early adopters will probably have always on systems that are capable of it. The degree to which I think it's going to be reliable enough for the average consumer, I think we're probably a little further out from that, from a world modeling and cognition standpoint. But for a decent portion of people, tens of millions, we're going to have people who are in regular conversation with AIs in casual, comfortable conversation. Everything from I cook all the time. I'm the cook in my family. Hey, how many quarts is it in a gallon? How many, what's the conversion? Tablespoons to ounces of water. What's the thing? To, hey, what did my wife say I needed to get at the grocery store? Remind me. She told me yesterday. Hey, when I opened the fridge earlier, did we have that cheese that I like?
That's the best one.
And listen, and there's stuff that I really want to push for, but we have to advocate for regulatorily. I mean, I think one of the classic ones is the cocktail party problem. And Reid, you must run into this all the time. You see somebody coming up to you, you recognize them, you know them. You don't remember why you know them or how you know them. And right now we're just like, hey, guy, good to see you, friend. And you're just looking for clues to try to remember. I'd love to be able to have your AI whisper to you, hey, this is this person. The last time you saw them was here. And you're like, oh, right. And that kind of thing. But that one we need help with, right? Right now there's regulations in Illinois and Texas, BIPA and QB, that make that kind of thing, tenuous at best if it's doable. So there's a bunch of very human problems where we could be a little bit more proactive, and I think comfortably so, in a totally privacy way, for secure way. But we got to do work. So 3 years from now, I do think you'll be in this kind of people at the leading edge, not the earliest adopters, not the bleeding edge, just the leading edge, just the early adopters will be having tremendous usefulness, kind of cognition and memory help from their assistants.
And where do you see kind of the panoply of wearables? Is the glasses going to work with a watch, work with a phone, or will there be some once you have the glasses, you don't need the watch as much anymore?
No, I think they want to work together. I mean, we probably are more than 10 years away from having the efficiency of compute from a thermal perspective to have the glasses stand alone. And if they're going to have another thing with them, so today Orion comes with this kind of, we call it a stage or a puck. It's a little battery that comes with it. You toss it in your bag, you toss it in your pocket, you don't take it out. And that's totally fine. Actually, it works pretty well for that. And it's nice enough to take it out. It's one of the things, by the way, one of the problems that is this universal problem that doesn't sound like a problem, but actually I think weirdly is taking your phone out of your pocket. Seems like it's such a, I mean, it's literally no effort at all. And yet what I've found when I'm wearing the Orions is I will do things that I would not have taken my phone out of my pocket to do, but because it's right there, I can do it. It's interesting. It's surprising how much that friction that actually creates once you get into it. It sounds totally insane. We are the most entitled species. I accept it, but it is the reality. Is that there are things that you use. So I think for me, at least, I think for the foreseeable future, you do want this to be a constellation of devices. And there's a lot of value in being on the wrist. The neural interfaces that we've developed here show that there's a tremendous amount of incremental signal and control we can give consumers without having to hijack their eyes or make them reach up and tap something on their temple arm. I think there's also a huge opportunity for the range of glasses. So if you have glasses that have no display, you want to pair them with a watch that has a display or with a phone that has a display. If your glasses do have a display, okay, now maybe you just have a simpler band on your wrist and you're wearing maybe a conventional wristwatch on your other wrist. We're in this space of wearables. So one thing that we actually haven't had to grapple with in the industry for a while is the luxury presentation, the identity that people want to bring to the world about themselves. They want to look a certain way. And so if I'm somebody who wants to look a certain way, I have to have the options to maintain that vision of myself while also being a part of the modern era. It's funny, there's been a lot of discussion about the app stores on Google and Apple devices. I really don't have a problem with those. That's not the issue I see. What worries me more is the degree to which these devices, which are the natural center of compute for a constellation of wearables, are locking down the access to third-party wearables manufacturers, to things like critical Bluetooth channels. The famous example that I'll use is the AirPods, which, listen, you can tell by my headphones, I'm a bit of an audio guy. I care about the quality of my audio. There are better headphones that you can get than the ones happen manufactured by Apple. AirPods are great. It's a great device. They have 70% of the market share, and they don't have that because they have the best product. Certainly not the best value product. They have it because they have a proprietary Bluetooth channel that makes it super easy to pair, and also because I think they're easy to lose. You have to buy a lot more. So there's but it really bothers me. Like, that shouldn't be that way. And I'm a '90s guy, so I'm an old school, I'm an old school computer construct guy. I'm not maybe full all the way to Tim Sweeney at Epic, but I'm somewhere in between the two. And so that's the stuff that worries me, is that your phone should be more useful to you than it is. And there's no reason they couldn't do that, except that they want to keep you in the ecosystem.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I think about that all the time. I bought non-AirPods, but they were too hard to use. And so I was like, forget it. It's like, this is not working for me.
Totally.
And it's also funny what you say about your phone. My husband just got me finally a smartwatch because he doesn't want me pulling out my phone. But my muscle memory, if I want to check the time, I literally pull my phone out of my back pocket. I literally need to teach myself to look at my wrist. So fair enough.
Every now and then I've caught myself looking at my phone when I have the Orions on, and there's literally a permanent clock in view of my face, and I'll still so like it's not just you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. One thing you said earlier is that you tell your team over and over again, like, what human life will be better, like what human on this earth will be using this. So can you talk about a time, it could be for the Orions or a different product, that you really saw like user testing got you, this is the aha, you saw something interesting, it made you have a new leap, like it's just such a great way to operate?
Yeah, there's some there's quite a few, but I'll tell you one that surprised me recently, which makes total sense in retrospect. One of the most popular demographics purchasing our Ray-Ban Meta glasses are blind people. Now, blind people buying glasses is a surprise. But if you watch them in the user research sessions, it makes total sense. Actually, and we have members of the team who are blind. We have a partnership with Be My Eyes, which is a great service. But in my head, as a seeing person, I have no problem. I'm like, I wonder if they have problems navigating to the restaurant or getting across the street. They don't. They have solutions for that. They've got Google Maps. It's reading directions into their ears. They've got a stick or a dog, or there's a bunch of systems that they have. They can get to the restaurant. You know what they can't do? They can't find the door. They can't find the door. It's like, where's the door? Like, and so what they do is they ask the glasses, hey, Meta, look and tell me where the door is. Oh gosh, my glasses are going to go off. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, it's to your left. And if they can't get that kind of thing done, they can call in to Be My Eyes. And now they've got a live video stream going to an AI agent at first. And if it fails, over to a human who helps them out. And so there's these moments where it's going to happen because you yourself are a human and you're like, yes, I as a human am like other humans and I would want this, so other humans would want this. But there are also these really fascinating times where you build the capability and this stuff comes out of the woodworks that you never saw coming.
And so obviously Meta, Jan LeCun, you guys are leaders in the AI space. And so what do you think are the things additionally that set you all apart? And what are you going to be focusing on for the years to come?
Well, we're pretty proud of our open source stance with Llama, which I think is really, I think we were one of the earlier ones, in my opinion, like some of its strategic benefit. Like if anyone builds great AI, our products get better.
Yep.
But people building great AI doesn't let them replicate our products. So we have this asymmetric benefit from AI. So there's a strategically commoditize your complements construct here. But it really is deeper than that for us. And if you've spent any time listening to Jan, you've heard that. We really think that this is the best way to accelerate progress, is you open source these things and people learn from them and you get back tenfold. When we launched Llama 1 and open sourced it, which I was a huge advocate for internally, I think it was a matter of days before somebody had a version of it running on a laptop. And I think it was a matter of weeks before someone had a version of it running on a phone.
It's amazing.
Which would have taken us, just from a resource standpoint, I'm sure we had the talent to do it. We weren't going to. It would have taken us, years to get to go do that because we just had other things that we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, wow, what a spectacular closed loop to have stumbled into almost with this powerful policy.
Well, I mean, this an obvious kind of challenge question to that last one is that, look, it's great when the open source stuff goes to startups and goes to, kind of entrepreneurs and academics and, people building stuff. More challenging if it goes to rogue nations, terrorists, criminals. What's the way to kind of navigate that, making sure more of that kind of innovation benefit in the loop happens that way and less of it with, like North Korean hackers holding hospitals ransom or, other kinds of things?
Yeah, well, there's two parts to this. I mean, I think, again, getting back to this kind of asymmetric construct of AI, I guess there's two parts. First one is I do kind of, again, very much you get my 90s heritage here. Information wants to be free. And I have absolutely zero faith that the most closed source thing that exists isn't actually widely available in the nation states that are inclined to attack those, whether it be through espionage, directly or indirectly. Like I believe that's likely the case. But setting that aside, even I still stand by this because I think the opportunity that you have to try to handcuff yourself to slow the progress of your enemies. The far bigger risk is that you just get lapped by your enemies. The people we're discussing, especially China, are highly capable. They have a tremendously talented pool of engineers. They're looking at the same thing we're looking at. You're very likely to end up having handicapped yourself relative to them rather than the opposite, which is like, yep, you got to engage in the race. It is the race. It is, this is our space race. This is what it looks like in our era. There's very few secrets and there's just progress, and you want to make sure that you're never behind. And so I would pour as much fuel on it as we can. And the fact that DeepSeek is open sourcing their technology is a tremendously positive thing for the entire industry. Learning from the great innovations they made in memory, the great innovations they made in how they manage, to shrink these models in terms of where and when they truncate, like really, really smart decisions that they made. They made those decisions because we put pressure on them. They arguably beat a bunch of American companies who were more lavishly funded because they were less lavishly funded, because they had to innovate inside of a tight circumstance around chips. And so we created the conditions for them to outpace us, and we're lucky they open sourced. I think you got to race this one to the top. I think it's a thing that we've got to engage in seriously as a nation. I think the CHIPS Act is a good start, but we need a lot more of that to bring domestic manufacturing to the forefront to reduce the tension that we're all feeling in the South China Sea. For me at least, like I think there's no way out but through.
Well, I would just because one thing I want to kind of to linger on a little bit in this, because I agree with, by the way, your two counterpoints as important points, Boz. But I do continue to linger on the, and I get look, we just accelerate and we try to accelerate to get past what the bad actors might be doing. But it is important to also kind of to some degree slow, contain, limit bad actors. And I tend to think that there must still be some things we can do. Like, because I was on the board of Mozilla for 11 years, a huge proponent of open source, at LinkedIn. We've actually had open source projects that have gone and become, their own multi-billion-dollar companies. And so it's very positive in a lot of different ways. But it's also kind of like, okay, if this is like going to do, cyber attack phishing, if it's going to be doing bioterrorism, there's some stuff that we need to do to do some kinds of things. And I know you guys are smart and care about this stuff. So I'm kind of curious about like, what's the thought about the navigation?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of people in our space, Reid, have had this conversation around safety, and I think it's an important one. The ones that come up most often are, the ones bio, cyber, and nuclear. Now, what's funny about nuclear is the main thing that's hard about nuclear is plutonium. the thing that's like really, it's like plutonium and uranium. Those are the hard pieces, and we locked those down as a society. I think there is a model there with bio. I think it probably is. There's probably the knowledge exists, and a lot of times the threats that I hear ascribed to AI fail the Google test. can I Google for this thing? And very often I can, in which case the AI isn't really the threat. The information isn't the threat. It's the fact that like you can mail order anthrax. I don't know if that's not gonna, don't back me up on that. That may not be, don't fact check me on that. But like you can mail order these things. And I have some friends and family who work in bio who are pretty consistently alarmed at what they're able to acquire for their labs without any kind of control. So I think there are regulatory solutions in the biospace. I think on the cyberspace, I actually feel way more optimistic about AI's ability to detect cyber attacks than to generate them. Of course, it will generate more, but I actually think we have been struggling on the detection side. And there's a lot of evidence that if you look at what nation state actors have been able to do with the U.S. with the OPM hack, with the hack, on some of the crypto exchanges, the biggest heist of all times, North Korea. I think AI is a much more asymmetrically valuable tool in defense than it is in attack. I think we have been on the wrong side of that for a little while. So that one I'm more bullish on. To tell you the one that I'm actually the most worried about, it's not any of those, it's fraud. It's good old fashioned fraud. I've already had the conversation with my parents. Hey, if somebody calls you and it looks like me and it sounds like me, but they're asking you for money, ask about a fact that only I would know. Right? There's a real education that has to happen. I talk often with people about this one, and it's a hard one to wrap their heads around, but I have to remind people that actually the period that we grew up in was very unusual historically. Before the photograph and before video, all media was presumed to be possibly fake, right? Like letters, the newspapers were presumed, you didn't know the veracity of it. There was a very unique period, never probably happened again, where you could produce a piece of media, a photograph or a video, that it was impossible to imagine faking it. It was like orders of magnitude more expensive to fake than to have it be real. And so these were presumptively true. That's not going to be the case anymore. So we're going to return to like a pre-1900s media relationship that we have in media. The kids are already there, by the way. The kids are already there. They already know. We have a generation to look after. It's us. It's our generation. We have a generation to look after who didn't have the antibodies for that. They don't have the antibodies for it. So for me, at least, I think that's a piece of education that I would put a lot of energy into as a national policy endeavor. As understanding, hey, we got to re-educate people that like, hey, all media that you see, no matter how realistic it looks or sounds, may be fake.
And so I think that begs the question that a lot of possible listeners have about the new AI world and how it relates to information accuracy. And sometimes that's AI created, sometimes that's user generated. Like, how do you think about this? Obviously, a lot of people have seen the new news out of Meta and your changes to fact checking and content review. Like, what's the positive case for what you guys did, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think community notes is just a better feature than fact checking was. It works at a larger scale. Like, do you use an encyclopedia these days, or do you use Wikipedia? Like, it's
Absolutely.
it's not that hard of it. It's like community notes has just proven itself to be a better feature. We're building a better feature. It's going to do a better job. I'm excited about that. That's not even a tough one. So for me, at least, like this is kind of my broader thought, which is like, I think it's not surprising for us as an American company. I think it may be more surprising in other parts of the world for me to say, like, yeah, people are allowed to say things, believe things that aren't true. And I think we've all learned a tough lesson that the nature of truth and what is true is also not as firm as we'd like it to be. We have to adjust to the fact that we grew up in this relatively golden era where, by the way, the two political parties were effectively almost the same political party. And we're exiting that period into what is probably more than we'd like to admit, a normal period of American or global democratic upheaval of tension and different ideas about the future of where things are going. And the technology is playing a huge role in that.
Going back to kind of the startup landscape, one of the questions I often get is, because of the importance of compute, size of data, et cetera, is AI a game that is only going to be won by the hyperscalers? And one of the things I think is, kind of very helpful about what Meta is doing with the open source stuff, right? This is in the positive category, is obviously making that, kind of a much more, field where a lot of different people can play. What do you think are going to be the things that the hyperscalers, Meta and the others, are going to be kind of like, this is the areas we're going to be deploying a bunch of stuff? And what are the things that you think are, kind of some of the range of interesting things with startups, and, how will that play out?
Yeah, we're super thrilled about the role that Llama's played in building up the ecosystem of startups and giving them a better shot to innovate. And we're seeing that really play out materially as hyperscalers are forced to take on innovations that came out of these little startups, and obviously vice versa is happening. Listen, the wisdom at every generation, and you know this better than anyone, Reid, the wisdom of any generation is these big companies from the last generation are obviously going to win the next generation. And it almost never happens. It almost never happens. And we never know why or how until it happens. And then we're like, oh, obviously that's why and how. And so I don't know why or how, but I suspect there is a lot of room for truly disruptive technologies. And by the way, it's funny, ChatGPT is a disruptor. Like that, OpenAI is a disruptor in the space. They're not a hyperscaler in the conventional sense. I think, now I will say, structurally, we actually know a lot more about the challenges the hyperscalers face. Google has a business model challenge, right? Like, are they willing to undermine and cannibalize one of the most successful business models, if not the most successful business model of all time? They've got the technology, the capability, they've got this tension, that's tough. Easier for us. This is all gravy for us. All of our products just get better. They just get better. Like, it's all good news for us. Microsoft, I think, is actually in a similar strong position. Their products get better. The consumers who use Office products get better. Having all the AI doesn't make you able to build Office, but having Office and with AI is better. So I feel like us and Microsoft win kind of no matter what. Like, with respect to the haters, I'm sorry to tell you, like, we're there. I think Google's got the tension. I think Amazon's somewhere between. AWS certainly could be helped tremendously, but is it a race to the bottom and they're just adding one more incremental service? So maybe it's a no-op for them. They're announcing their partnership with Anthropic. They have a huge investment in Anthropic. Alexa's got a huge footprint. Can they rejuvenate Alexa with this new program? Panos is there. I think he's obviously a tremendous talent. So I'm rooting for them. I think that'd be great to have these AIs in the homes and more interesting places. So ironically, what we have is a lot more visibility into the hyperscalers and the landscapes they face. The startups are a total wild card, and that's what I love about them. They come out of nowhere. DeepSeek, it is a little bit weird that DeepSeek kind of took the world by storm. Actually, 4 weeks after the model actually dropped, we were studying R1 and Christmas, and we thought it was cool and interesting and learned a lot from it. And then kind of the whole world woke up to it a month later. I'm not sure why that delay happened or what was causing that, but the startup. So we're seeing that consistently, and I don't think that would be happening if Llama hadn't been out there, if I'm being totally honest with you. And I don't think the pricing would have come down as much on the hyperscalers if Llama wasn't out there. And I think that pricing is also enabling a lot of innovation above the AI space, which is frankly not getting enough attention. But people putting these AIs into practice and use case and unlocking new use cases has been big. I think, when Gemini went out with a really large context window, there was a bunch of use cases that were impossible before that now Gemini's got a customer base that they've earned by innovating in that space. So I think it's exciting.
Yep.
I love that state of the state and reality check. It reminds me of that meme that's like, yeah, I knew search was going to be big, so I invested in Yahoo. And then I knew smartphones were going to be huge, so I did research in motion. And then social was obviously huge, so MySpace was my biggest investment.
Right.
It's like, it's really hard to predict what's going to hit.
That's right. And we underestimate the last mile. We underestimate the interface design. We underestimate the use cases. And that's where I think ChatGPT has this huge mind share because they did the last mile work.
So on this podcast, Reid always gets to ask the questions about science fiction, and I'm always woefully behind. But I'm going to take a gander, since you have youngish kids, that you have either read or seen Wild Robot. And
of course, yeah.
I cannot help, literally they have the depiction of the farm that was fallen down. And then because of robots and autonomous robots, it, became this wonderful and beautiful farm. You have this robot who has empathy, who is, talking to the animals in the forest. Like, just talk to me about Wild Robot. And do you think it's a positive depiction of AI and robotics, negative, warning? Like, how do you see it? I'm sure your kids have seen it. And that's one thing that's shaping their vision of robots.
Yeah, there's of course it's based on a children's book which they've read, and then they saw the movie. First of all, I'm a huge film buff, film fan, and I cried like 3 or 4 times when I watched that movie.
Too.
And I watched it like again and cried again at the same points, which is unusual for me. I'm a bit of a crier, and I got no problem with that. But no, so it was a touching film, and really a film not about robots, really a film about motherhood. Really a film about parenthood,
humanity, yeah,
and so touching on that. Um, if I'm being a critic here,
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm not exactly sure how Roz's "hey, let's all get along and not eat each other" works out more than one season.
That's fair.
When the carnivores need to eat things, like I don't know, kind of unresolved in the film is how exactly the carnivores survive in Roz's Brave New World that she's trying to craft for them. So it's I think the morality of that part is a little heavy-handed for me, and I would have loved them to embrace more the circle of life construct of like, yep, this is the natural way of things, and I've protected you as your mother, and but neither here. I'm not sure that would have worked with the fox anyways. And as far as a treatise on robotics go, it's an infinite magical robot that has permanent energy and has arms that extend to infinity and all these other kind of things. So for me, what I've been thinking a lot more about in science fiction is like engineering oriented science fictions. Andy Weir's the best at this, right? Project Hail Mary. If people are familiar with The Martian, which is a great fun one, and I do think the book is better than the movie, with all respect to Matt Damon. I think Project Hail Mary is even better, and it's not just the accuracy of it; it's near future science fiction, so it's tangible, but it's optimistic about humanity's ability to engineer our way out of grave problems. Those I love, and those are the ones that I'm excited to start reading to my kids.
All right, rapid fire. Is there a movie, and you can answer at any length. This is just the same questions we ask, all of our excellent guests. Is there a movie, song, or book that fills you with optimism for the future?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, let me think about this. It's funny. One of the reasons I started getting involved with film a little bit is because I want more optimistic stories out there. I think I'm going to go with Star Trek. And by the way, the current series are fantastic, but you don't have to pick the current series. It really is a beacon of optimistic science fiction in a landscape of otherwise relatively dystopian works, which I think are just a little easier to write, frankly. So I got to go with Star Trek on that.
That's awesome. Boz, what is a question that you wish people would ask you more often?
Well, we've gotten into some of them today. It's funny, people hear about my job and they want to understand that they certainly want to understand what's happening right now. What is AI? Is it a big thing? Is it a bad thing? But they so rarely get into what is the positive vision of the future. And again, it speaks to the fact that I think there's maybe more dystopian science fiction because there's a bigger audience for it, because we are, as a species, a little bit more drawn to the macabre. We're a little bit more motivated by our anxieties than we are by our ambitions at times. But the thing that I don't get asked often is like, paint me the picture of the beautiful future. And I've spent time doing that in the mixed reality and virtual reality space. This idea of people unbounded by geography. I talked earlier about the birth lottery, and where you're born is a huge factor in it. And because it limits what opportunities you have. What if you didn't have those limits? Because the metaverse enabled you to bring the full strength of your talents to bear. And how much would humanity benefit if people, no matter where they were born, were able to bring that brilliance to the forefront? And then I talk about AR, and what if everyone had that memory, the cognition, the hearing, the vision, the capabilities? How does society move forward when we all have those capabilities in equal measure, and at measures that are superior to what biology can provide us?
Well, here's another positive question, which is, where do you see progress or momentum outside of your industry that inspires you?
Medicine, man, it feels like the unlock we're getting to with cell models, the unlock that we're getting to with AI being able to take on modeling tasks that were previously, incomparable. I'll take a little example. We built a custom AI at Fair to do material exploration for our the optics for our glasses, and it was the solution space. It's one of those solution space where it's like bigger than the number of grains of sand on the earth, and you have to look at every molecule and assess what properties it has. And it was short work to build this incredibly dedicated model that narrowed us down to like 20 possible solutions, of which it looks like 2 are going to work for our purposes. Incredible result. And so you do that, and you think about medicine, where you're so often trying to do a certain kind of protein folding. You're trying to do a certain kind, and shout out to Demis and his work and the team there. Congratulations on the Nobel Prize. Like, I just think the combination of these two things is going to produce an explosion in great health outcomes for people. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Couldn't agree more. And Boz, you teed me up so perfectly for our final question on possible, which is, can you leave us with a final thought on what you think is possible to achieve if everything breaks humanity's way in the next 15 years? And what's our first step in that direction?
I think 15 years, we're looking at significant shared blending of digital into physical. So people coming together, wearing wearables, wearing glasses, and having rich conversations with people who are both present and not present, collaborating on work, on models, and with a true feeling of presence, a true feeling that they're all there. And someone, by the way, they're not on a wearable, they're on a phone, but they're being projected into three-dimensional space effectively through a codec avatar. Everyone is getting the most sense they can through whatever tools they have, whatever modalities they have access to be present and feel present. We're so much more in touch with the context of our lives than we give ourselves credit for. I talked earlier about the gap between the conscious and the subconscious, the cerebellum and the amygdala maybe. The context in which I consume information, I exchange information, the subtleties of facial gesture and body posture are huge portions of our brain. The infratemporal cortex, just an entire area of brain dedicated to reading faces. Just all it's doing is reading faces. And you want that. And no one thinks this is that.
Right.
No one thinks that video calling is that. Which makes us bound for certain things by geography. You have to be there. Now, I don't think anything will ever be as good as being there, but we can get a lot closer than we have so far in 15 years.
I love it. Such a pleasure to have you on the pod. Thanks so much.
Boz, always look forward to our conversations.
Yeah, thank you guys both for having me.
Possible is produced by Wonder Media Network. It's hosted by Aria Finger and me, Reid Hoffman. Our showrunner is Sean Young. Possible is produced by Katie Sanders, Edie Allard, Sarah Schleid, Vanessa Handy, Aaliyah Yates, Paloma Moreno Jimenez, and Malia Agudelo. Jenny Kaplan is our executive producer and editor.
Special thanks to Surya Yalamanchili, Saida Sapieva, Thanasi Delos, Ian Alice, Greg Beato, Parth Patel, and Ben Rellis. And a big thanks to Meta, John Erla, and Tatin Yang.